Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Accuracy in America, brought to you by Accuracy Academia. I am your host, Don Irvine, joined by my co-host, Brian McNichol.
Good morning. Hello, fellow summer lovers.
Yeah, you have to kind of go with the flow. Yeah, it's been good. How was July 4th?
It was good. I was in actually I saw something I'd never seen before. So we went to the baseball game in Fayetteville, North Carolina, the Fayetteville Woodpeckers. And so the city of Fayetteville also has and also anytime you go to a baseball game on 4th of July, there's going to be fireworks, right? So the city of Fayetteville also had a fireworks show, maybe 500 feet from the baseball one. So like during the 7th inning of this game, like out over the left field wall was a massive fireworks show. And you could see the left fielders, like, I mean, you can only hear things blow up over your head so many times before you get a little freaked, right? So, but it was great. You got to see two fireworks shows for the price of one.
Oh, that's great. That just makes me wonder, Bowie. Well, now it's the Chesapeake Bay Sox.
That's right.
They renamed the team, but they have a lot of fireworks events during the course of the season. A lot of fireworks nights.
Right.
So I'm pretty sure the one thing they do not do is they do not do that in conjunction with a Pets in the Park.
That's right. The pets get a little upset.
Yeah, that would not be a good thing. That just came into my mind. It's like, you better keep all that separate.
Don's promotions.
Just remember, don't
guaranteed to set your park on fire.
Yeah, I mean, I love, those are really the only fireworks show I really ever go to. Is that when I go to an occasional Bay Sox game, is to try to tie it into a fireworks night. It's a pretty good show. I mean, these parks do a pretty good. These teams do a pretty good job, and I love these names. I mean, the Woodpeckers. There's so many funny, interesting names throughout the minor league ball that are out there.
That's right.
So, it does also say to me too. It's just I don't know. Have you ever watched anything? The only thing I've been able to watch is online. Which has been the Savannah Bananas, but that is just become an incredible, franchise. They went from this team in this little park, and now they take the show on the road. I guess they got several traveling teams.
Yeah.
They have people like Jeremy Guthrie, former O's pitcher, Royals pitcher, a lot of other baseball people, former major leaguers, come and they pitch or play for a little bit and have some fun.
And they involve, like when they played at LSU, and they brought in Kim Mulkey, and she was supposed to throw out the first pitch, and she got thrown out of the game before she could throw out the first pitch. And it's all staged, right? But it's still pretty funny,
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, that's all great theater, right? I mean, you want entertainment. I mean, that may be some of the most ultimate entertainment, because you're like, there's really nothing at stake there. They have I guess their regular version, and then they have the banana ball version, right?
Yeah.
So they have a couple of different things that they do, but apparently, in terms of their ticket sales are through the roof. They attract
selling out major league stadiums.
Yeah, I've tried to get on wait lists for when they come here. I know there's no chance, but I thought I'd try. That's something Spencer and I wanted to try to do, but we knew just the wait list to go, if we wanted to go to Savannah, was going to be, just bonkers. And then they start taking on the road, and it's equally as crazy.
Yeah, that's right.
So
the ballpark in Savannah is not that big.
Right. It's a very small park.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I'm going to give a little, tip of my hat or whatever to Jesse Cole and his wife, and how he's been able to just create this massively successful enterprise. And it's good for baseball, I think, overall. I mean, in the sense of it drives people to a park, and it's not yeah, you experience baseball. It's not
it's not
something of the major league. It's not real baseball, but if you can get young kids interested
You create
in
the
the
habit
sport.
of going there and having fun at a baseball field, which, like, if you're a kid and you go to Bowie to see Chesapeake,
Yeah.
I still can't get used to that.
Yeah,
But
I know.
and
Ooh,
you have fun. The kids have fun. There's stuff for them to play. There's places for them to do their thing. There's rides and specials and games they play on the field and all this stuff. So, they go out of their way to get kids involved in the game and to make it fun.
yeah. All right. Before I leave Bowie / Chesapeake, I have one nit to pick with that team, which kind of just still irks me, which was before they made the name change. They sent out emails and they said they had something big coming, and then they had this big like 50% off sale or something to that off the Bowie Bay Sox merchandise, right? And then a couple days later comes the new logo, new naming of the team, and I'm thinking like anybody who bought the Bowie Bay Sox stuff, did
You
they
got
did they
nothing now. You
did
can't
they
even wear it.
did they just get hosed?
I gotcha.
Oh, so yeah, it's like I don't know about the way they played that. I mean, it doesn't sit right with me. So, but I didn't buy any merchandise, so I didn't get hosed as such. Anyway, all right. Well, we've got a few topics to discuss today. I'm going to start off with this Texas flooding situation. It's a terrible tragedy, and we had flooding in New Mexico. We had flooding also in North Carolina, but Texas, the Hill Country, Kerr County, Kerrville, Texas, it just this massive flood. I mean,
Right.
just and wiped out these poor Christian girls camp attendees that were there, plus others. So this is along the Guadalupe River.
Right.
You know, I don't. I've been to the San Antonio area. I haven't really been to say the part that they really call the hill country of that area, so I don't really know. But my reading is that the soil is it's like clay. There's lots of things.
Very poor, like gray soil.
Yeah, and it
Not,
doesn't and it
it's
doesn't
like,
doesn't absorb the rain very well, right?
right. It doesn't absorb runoff at all.
Yeah,
It's, which a lot of the desert is like that. A lot of places where and that's the edge of the desert, the hill country. You notice like there's very few tall trees there. Most of what are there are cedar, which sucks out of a lot of the moisture out of the ground. Cedars are very moisture dependent trees, and they grow low to the ground, so they control the moisture, control shade, and so forth for themselves. So it's the kind of place where the rain is not going to hold. The river rose 27 or 27 feet in 45 minutes. So yes, they were warned. Yes, they were all the requisite warnings. Yes, the weather service was doubly staffed. They usually have 2 people in the New Braunfels weather station, which governs San Antonio, Austin, and Houston, and they had 5, right? Because they knew that this was going to be a big deal, and they warned everybody in plenty of time. But the warnings, it came at 1 a.m. And another thing is, a lot of people brought this up, like how many times in the summer around here do you get a flood warning, a flood watch? Right, especially the coastal flood warnings. If you ever had an address near Alexandria, right, you get almost constant every time it's supposed to rain. You get a flood notice. Okay, so it obviously does not flood every time it rains. So you get a lot of warnings that don't add up to anything, right? The weather service tells you, they have their criteria for when to warn people, and they warn people, and the criteria is well established, and so forth. But a lot of times the flooding doesn't come. So now when you say, okay, this time we really mean it, how do they know, right? So it's probably a pretty good percentage of people who were hurt or killed in this, did not heed the warnings because they didn't take them seriously. And the other thing is everyone was notified. Some of the people were not in position. We're talking about something that happened at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning and happened very, very fast. So, the idea that is really, who do you blame? I don't know. I don't know who could be blamed. I think it kind of snuck up on everyone.
Yeah. No, I mean this is a natural disaster. We have this kind of situation in terms of natural disasters occurring all the time in different types of natural disasters in different part of the country. I mean, that part of the area is known as a flash flood alley. So okay,
Right.
that's a signal right then and there that you're in a kind of a danger zone, and that you're going to have these flash floods. Now, as you noted, this 26, 27-foot surge in 45 minutes, that's just ridiculous. It's just how do you plan for that, and it catches people off guard. That's pretty tough. But I mean, we've talked a lot in the past too on the show about all the wildfires in the West. They have this ongoing problem of wildfires, and they've had loss of life and towns wiped out and things like that. These things unfortunately happen. We have tornadoes. We've you know in the heartland. We've got hurricanes along the coast. These things happen. There are these there. It's just the natural topography of our country and certain rules and regulations that have come into effect over the years that say do this, do that, or don't do this, or don't do that. Sometimes it's contributed to that. I was reading on this thing here in Texas that in 2017 the officials down there were looking at they were actually planning on uh, you know building early warning system on flash flooding, but they didn't get a government grant, and they thought, well, it's too much money, so they abandoned that. So that was that's 8 years ago. Okay, but what are we seeing today is just that you know the liberals, the liberal media, the Democrats, all these people are they're pointing to the Trump administration and Trump administration officials and saying, "Oh, this is because of Doge cuts. This is because of whatever Trump budget cuts and all this stuff, and Trump is to blame." And Charles Schumer has he sent a letter to the Inspector General, to say, maybe this, I urge you to investigate this. It's like, investigate what?
Right. Right.
Yeah. I mean,
I think this is so one of the things that's kind of going on now is right. They're trying to defund PBS and NPR. The rescission legislation that has now been agreed to by both houses to defund it. So now they're in conference and they're working out the final version to send to the president, which should happen in the next 2-3 days, right? So but they're supposed to vote on it before they leave this week. So, what happens to that vote, right? Because they're creating this narrative where, this was an information problem, right? We didn't get the information to the people. I'm curious, like, what would Camp Mystic have done? You have, 150 girls out in the woods. You pack them all up at 1 a.m. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what they do. I don't know how that works, right? I know the pastor that runs the camp died trying to go back in and rescue the girls. So, it wasn't that he wasn't trying, but I just think that, they probably heard a lot of false flood warnings before. And, they have a tough group to move, right? It's tough to move 150 kids. And I'm not sure like how that would have happened. And do you know where the flood's coming from? So you can not go out, go right into it, trying to escape, all those questions, who knows, right? We'll never know. So I just think sometimes you have to accept that it's a tragedy, that things happen, and, I don't know what would be done to prevent it. I saw on Twitter shortly before we went on the air, someone saying the Texas legislature is meeting in a special session today, and they're going to discuss changing the marijuana laws to make them more restrictive, which not many states are doing these days. But they're not going to talk about early warning systems. I don't really think early warning systems was a problem, but it's worth looking at. They're not going to talk about global warming, because of course this storm was caused by Trump ignoring global warming, and they're not going to talk about the NOAA weather station being defunded. Right. Well, none of those are relevant to this, right? And I don't care what Texas does about marijuana laws. I don't even know what they're talking about, but none of them do that, right? None of that is relevant to that. So, I don't know. I think I think that we're reaching a point where, things are being politicized so brazenly and nakedly and falsely that, even the consumer on the street can see that the concerns the left is raising are nonsense.
Yeah. I mean, look, this camp has been in operation since 1926.
Yeah.
They have not had anything like this during their nearly 100-year history. I mean, this flood was of massive proportions. It's you could put it into the once in a lifetime or once in 100 years or whatever number of years you want to pick off, say, kind of probability, because they just haven't experienced anything like that before. What the unfortunate part of this too is that it wasn't just those campers that were swept away, but other people too, because the river's a popular area for people to camp out. And it happened over the July 4th weekend, a time when, people are out. I mean,
people are out and cops and officials, first responders are really not.
Yeah. So this was a kind of a culmination. It was just a confluence of lots of events and things taking place that only exacerbated, the death toll here and the tragedy and the property, damage and everything like that. I don't know how Camp Mystic, how they come back from that necessarily, but they seem, the news reports I've seen seem to be that they're pretty resilient and they're determined to rebuild and move on and everything like that, which is what they probably should be doing. But shame on the politicians for turning this into some kind of political football, for trying to take this tragedy, particularly since it involves so many young children, and then try to blame this on the president and his administration, when there is, that's the farthest thing you can find. I mean, I don't like it when any politician injects themselves into, conversations where you have this huge loss of human life and tries to turn it for their own political gain. That is not going to help the families deal with the loss of their children. It does not help us come together. I mean, you mentioned, it continues to drive us further apart and continues to polarize us, which we do not need to have at this point in time. All right. Before I move on to the second one, I forgot to do this by your request, and I finally remembered to do this today.
Oh, there it is. There it is.
So there it is. The
Don and Young
Irvine bobblehead.
Yeah, I don't announce when bobblehead night is going to be, and the first 10,000 viewers.
Yeah, I know. I should check with the person who had this done. It says, how do I get these done in bulk? How do I, what's the cost? Right. I'll use this as some kind of giveaway. Yeah, it's pretty cute, but
it's pretty good.
Yeah, and plus you get those little bobbleheads at the ballpark now, which are tiny. This thing actually, the base of this thing, it's actually kind of heavy. Anyway, it's a pretty quality product.
Quality stuff, a quality bobblehead.
Quality bobblehead. All right. So we talked about the big beautiful bill last week, and we were kind of trying to figure out whether or not Mike Johnson
got that wrong.
Finished law. Yeah, I mean, we talked about it's an arbitrary July 4th day. We didn't really have to get done. And son of a gun, they did it.
They did it. They sure did.
Yeah. So
I mean, I gotta say, man, Shreveport Mike, you gotta quit doubting him. Yeah. I mean, he gets the thing across the finish line. He gets it past the objector. I guess they talked Ralph Norman into not voting at all, which is as far as they could go. And Massey voted against it, and everyone else voted for it. All those other people, there were like 15 of them. He moved 14 of them into a safe place and got it across the finish line.
Yeah. So that was, when I saw that news break, I was really surprised, because I'm thinking like, wow, I didn't think it was going to happen. I thought, there's a chance it would happen, but I didn't think it was going to happen that quickly. And yet he did it. He met the president's deadline. Not that it really mattered, but it was a good, kind of like I said before, kind of a PR, kind of a feel good thing. He can sign it on July 4th. He can use that, So there were a lot of positive things for the Trump administration by getting that whole thing done and signed. Of course, now it begins the fighting or the arguing and from the Democrats about all the bad things about how America is going to be ruined. And what did James Carville say? It was just, this will be the decimation or whatever of the Republican Party, by passing this. And so which has been a lot of noise about, this bill will be very hard for Republicans in Congress to defend when they run for re-election in 2026. I'm not so sure about that. I don't quite, get
what
it.
What are you talking about? Your taxes would have gone way up. All the like big conservative priorities are in there: defunding Planned Parenthood, defunding PBS, NPR, tax cuts, deregulation. It's all in there. It's all the stuff we wanted. It's not a complete list, but it's there's not really much in there that we were not calling for before Trump became president.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
Planned Parenthood has sued Trump because it was eliminated from the funding. Right. And so this is now you're into, and a judge gave an injunction, provided, said the Trump administration cannot enforce the law of not appropriating money to Planned Parenthood. Now, we're not talking about an executive order anymore, right? The big, beautiful bill had that in there. So this is, both houses of Congress have approved this bill, and the president has signed it, saying they don't get money. So this is not an abuse of executive power. This is duly enacted legislation by Congress. So now you have a district court judge saying duly enacted legislation by Congress that originated in the House that the Constitution requires. I have say over that. I can say that that's not valid, right? Because I mean the judge's thing is that this is the affiliates challenging the funding, not Planned Parenthood. And it's like, that's a distinction without a difference to me. And it'll be interesting. But the judge has said, the judge has substituted her judgment for not just Trump, not just the administration, but the Congress and the administration. And I think that the talk in Washington now is that this will get overturned, and when it gets overturned, there will be a move afoot to impeach this judge. And I think it's right. I think that a signal needs to be sent that you cannot make up law on your own just to drag these guys through the mud, right? Just to make them do extra work, which is what she appears to be doing. She knows it's not going to win. That's right. That's right.
Right. That's true. Right. Once it becomes law, people forget about the vote. Right.
Yeah, that's right.
They don't.
Who cares? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many votes it passed by at all.
Right. I mean, the same for Obamacare. It doesn't matter how many votes it got by. It became law.
Yeah. And it couldn't be eliminated because John McCain, rolled himself up the Senate floor and went or whatever,
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, and the thing is the bill, on this defunding kind of thing, as I understand, I mean, it didn't mention Planned Parenthood specifically, right? But it just basically said providers that receive more than $800,000 a year and provide these services relating to abortion or whatever, and things like that. So Planned Parenthood is the biggest beneficiary of this. So yeah, so they're going to be, they were the target without being named per se. And Planned Parenthood is like a lot of these other liberal organizations. When they get kind of targeted like this, they're like, oh, but now we're going to have to close a third of our clinics and do all these kinds of things.
I don't care. I wish you'd close the other 2/3 too. I could not care less, and I don't care about this. they provide other services. They don't, right? Because like people have done investigations on that, and they call them. I'd like an appointment for a pap smear. Well, we don't actually do that. We can give you people to call. Okay, I would like a breast screening. Well, we don't actually do that. We will give you people to call. So, okay, that's right. But, you're in the abortion business. Money's fungible. And I couldn't care less if every Planned Parenthood facility in America shut down tomorrow. Not one
Yeah, I mean, that really is their business, right? I mean, that's what
right.
they're
That really is their business. They don't care
Yeah.
about anything else.
Yeah, they can try to throw up a bunch of smoke and mirrors and just and try to disguise it as something else, but that's what they're known for, and I think that's why the legislation was kind of written to this effect, saying like, we know how much money is going to them, and we're going to find a way to cut this off without naming them directly, and everything. Another thing that is in the bill that's got the liberal media all just up in arms is this whole thing about Medicaid cuts, and that actually is and Planned Parenthood was using Medicaid money in order to do the abortions thing too,
right.
So they were a beneficiary of that, but this Medicaid cut, this is not about throwing a bunch of people off the Medicaid rolls per se, right?
This is taking out the illegals and the freeloaders.
Right. It's about the abuse because because of the pandemic, rules were relaxed and enrollment in Medicaid soared, and so you just wound up, the government was giving them a lot of money, and so they took that money and expanded the rolls. But there's a lot of abuse, within the Medicaid system. There are a lot of able-bodied people, who are also, who also they can work. They're not poor, so they're trying to wring some of that out and try to roll some of this back, and yet, but the liberals, the problem is that once you grant this stuff to people, trying to take it away, becomes difficult, because then they're all like, oh, you can't take away that benefit. It's like, you're an able-bodied person. I mean,
So there are, the Medicaid is supposed to be for people at or near the poverty line, right?
Right.
There are about 32 million people at or near the poverty line. Medicaid serves 90 million people. So who are the other 60 million? Right? There are people who don't belong on it, right? They make too much money. They're 4.5 times some of these states, 4.5 times the federal poverty rate. You're still eligible for Medicaid? No, we don't need to be paying for that. If you're making 4.5 times the poverty rate, you pay for your own insurance. Say that without apology. Get a job. If you want to grow the availability of insurance, I will join you in backing legislation that you can create all kind of affinity groups. Like, why can't the Latter-day Saints join together and be a group for insurance? Why can't your temple, my Catholic church, the St. Thomas of Becket, fund for insurance, right? Why not? People move in and out, but you keep your insurance the same. Why can't we do that? Oh, we can't. It's got to be your work. No, it doesn't. That's a law that we made in World War II, and it made a lot of sense during, with the immediate aftermath of World War II, but it doesn't really anymore. So, change that. Let other people consider themselves to be a group for the purpose of buying insurance. That doesn't bother me.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's an interesting point, because when I was younger, when I was first married, I wasn't crazy about some of the insurance premiums, that we were facing, as a young couple. And for a while there, before I made the switch. Well, I guess I had this for a little while, and then I made the switch before our first child was born, which is probably a good thing in the end. But I actually joined the Maryland Farm Bureau. All right. Now, I didn't have to be a farmer.
Right.
But I paid some $30 a year or whatever it was in dues, and then I could be eligible for their health plan, which was cheaper than the other ones that I was getting. I guess it was because I was a single person or whatever, and that's what I did. So after I got married and finally, I went ahead and joined Kaiser, which I wasn't crazy about. But then when we started having children, that was a better way to have the better way to pay for my medical care that way for a while. So, but yeah, affinity group. I mean, look, these people. I mean, the other thing too is that there's still healthcare exchanges in the states, and I've come off of those here in the last year, and they are remarkably inexpensive. If you don't have much of an income, you're basically not paying. I've got a friend of ours who lives up in Delaware. She's a divorcee, and she basically lives off the assets, from her divorce, more or less, right? Maybe does a little odd job here and there, or whatever, and things like that, and investment income kind of thing like this. So for the most part, she does not have much of the way of income, and apparently, she when she was here and then she moved to Delaware, because of that low income number, she paid next to nothing for good health care because of the Obamacare exchange. So there's still this liberal policy in effect that would, it still will cost you and me as a taxpayer. It just, it goes elsewhere, but it's not, it wouldn't be it won't really be fraudulent, because you'd say, in the sense of like you'd provide your income, and then they say, okay, because they'll check it against your tax return every year to see whether or not that holds up, and adjust your, and see whether or not you're owed money, or you got to pay more money once a year. So there's a little bit of a check and balance with that system. Yeah, those, if those people are out there on Medicaid, they could probably get better care under healthcare exchange. At least I felt that I was getting good care.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. If you're out in a hot field, you don't really have a lot of time to navel gaze, fight yourself and chew yourself
Well,
out.
I mean, speaking of that too, I mean, in that way. So what did our agricultural secretary want to do? And she
was wanting to create the carve out for farm workers.
Yeah, but I mean, she was telling these people what were on welfare. What was that exactly? She was telling them that they could go.
Oh, well, she said, there's 34 million people who ought not be on Medicare.
Yeah.
We can put them. We got jobs for them, right? Yeah. Working in the farm, right? No, it's not. It's not. Obviously, of course, the left comes out. She wants 80-year-old women out picking tomatoes. It's like, that's not what she's saying. But there are some people in that 34 million who definitely could. I mean, so like the day Obamacare became law, the state of New York added 525,000 people to its healthcare rolls. Now, are you telling me that day, 525,000 people who were paying for their own health insurance one way or the other no longer were able to afford it? No, you just wanted a government giveaway vote buying program, and here was a large body of people to help you. This is not about the exchanges, right? This is about people being added to the Medicare, Medicaid rolls, where taxpayers are paying all the cost of their health care. And you didn't have that. There weren't 525,000 people in New York that day that needed to be on the government dole, added to the government dole. It's just not true. So now somebody comes along and says, we can't afford this anymore and we have to fix it. And it's, you're killing grandma and making her pick tomatoes. I mean, that's a way, and conservatives, when we're debating this, when we're talking about this stuff, and we say, well, it would be practical to just do X and just provide X and just, it'll be cheap, everybody will be happy, blah, 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 blah. And someone else always comes into that discussion and says, if you start adding benefits, they will be here forever. You'll never get them off the books, no matter how ineffective they are, or no matter how much difficulty you have paying for them. So, don't put them on because you won't be able to get them up. And that's what's going on now. So the Democrats are trying to get them off, right? And, one of the things that's going on here that they're not reckoning with, they're not understanding the consequences of, is that Trump is term limited. He can't run again. He does not care what they think. So he can just do what he thinks is best and ride it out.
Yeah, and I still remember decades ago about reading stories about, people on welfare, where, welfare gives you more money for every time you have a baby. Well, what was that? What did that do? That took a lot of these people, and they just kept having more babies.
Right. And more importantly, punished you severely if you married the dad. You brought the dad into your home. Well, we can't help you at all. Okay. So you said have a lot of babies and don't let daddy in the house.
Yeah.
Right.
That's right.
Both things, both
Yeah.
of which were terrible for America.
Have
You
a
all
baby,
these kids
have
with
a
no
baby,
dad.
but no nuclear family.
Yeah. Right. They have never understood like the role dads play.
Yeah. No, it's just we have a lot of government policies that that just do so much damage.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's the thing. The bottom line too is that when you create these programs and you put people on these programs, you cannot get them off, as you said. I mean, that is just the only way they go off is when they die.
Yeah. And so now
That's it.
you're about to take a bunch of them off now.
Yeah.
And it'll be fine. What'll happen is, 3 months from now, no one will remember that any of this occurred.
Right. But these are areas where, where Elon Musk and Doge and everything were, I think they were all trying to make some headway into these government systems, because the government systems are such a patchwork of just bad computers that don't speak to each other and are antiquated, and can't vet and handle the volume of information that they're asked to process in for the most part. And so, you want to weed out some inefficiency from the Medicaid system? This is a great place. This is where good systems would do that. I mean, Social Security has that problem. We just have there are problems throughout the government of just where you have people collecting money, receiving benefits that don't deserve it. Oh yeah, and then the people. Oh yeah, I'm sorry for the people who got extra money from Social Security for years because Social Security botched it, and now they want to claw back the money, and they're like, but we can't afford to pay it back. It's like, well, why did you take it in the first place? You made no attempt to pay it back. You knew that you were getting money that you did not deserve. At the very least, if you're dealing with the government and trying to give them money back, which probably is not an easy thing to do, take that money and put it into a savings account, separate it out where it's money you cannot touch. So as soon as the government says, we want that money back, you write them a check or whatever and send them the money back, and then you're square. Rather than go out there and do what a lot of Americans did, which is they spent that money and they said, we don't have the money to do it. And we're like, I just don't have a lot of sympathy for this,
Right.
And all that. All right. So that's interesting. Okay.
Which brings the one more thing is student loans.
Right.
Okay. So you cannot, we can't keep doing what we're doing because now we have created, thanks to the Biden administration, we've created the expectation that you really won't be required to pay it back. Somewhere down the line, they'll forgive it. Okay. And I hear these people telling these things like I've made every payment on my loan for 15 years and the balance is still higher than when I started, right? Because of interest. I'm not catching up at all. So, that's something that they can look at fixing. There's a proposal now afoot to say that you can discharge student loans through bankruptcy. Might be a clear in the books type of thing. But I think that you have to think about student loans. I don't know what Trump's thinking on this, but he's going to probably have to privatize that before he leaves office because there's no way that government can keep doing this because people don't think they'll have to repay.
Yeah. Well, and it was private before,
Yeah.
right? At one time. Yeah. So, they're going to restart the clock on the interest, I think, on August 1st. Once again, this is coming, Joe Biden kind of set you up and said, oh, under the SAVE program, you're going to be able to clear all this stuff. Obama and Biden, have put into place so many gimmicks on student loans. You work for the government for X number of years or whatever, public sector, you're going to get this, forgiven and stuff like that. And
they thought they could buy the middle class by addressing student loans. But the fact is, most of the middle class either didn't go to college or paid for it as long since paid for. Like mine's paid for.
Yeah.
I was paying it as I was going.
I think, I think we've talked about this too, though. It's like the real culprit in a lot of this, though, is the fact that colleges and universities, because of the student loan program, charge you far more than your education is worth, right? So as a result, you wind up owing them a ridiculous amount of money, which, can be paid off by some if they're making a lot of money, but some people may struggle to get ahead if, job situation gets kind of fluky or whatever. But it's the student loan program created this monolith in higher education that really has resulted, in these trillions of dollars of student loan debt. And the schools, they walk away from this. They don't care. I mean, they got their money, right?
Right.
They really don't care about the student loan debt problem because they already got their money.
That's right.
Through their scheme.
Make them care. You're sitting there with $620 billion, whatever the Harvard endowment is, loan them money out of that. What's that money doing?
Yeah, no, I mean, once again, I understand that there's some restrictions on some things, but things have got to change.
Yeah.
You're just like, how do you justify holding that much money, and then charging all this money to students? So, there's still a lot of reform in higher education that we'd all like to see, I think, along the way. Trump is trying to reform a lot of things. It's just that
there's a lot of inertia.
There's a lot of inertia, but the scope of this is so large. You've got 4 years, to kind of try to make a dent in some of this. That's hard, but he's trying. I mean, and that's what gets the liberals all upset, is because he's trying. He's actually trying to do things and try to make things go. All right, so his old switching gears now. His old buddy Elon has now gone off and announced that what's it called? The America Party, I think it was calling it.
Something like that.
Yeah, he was going to form that. He's going to put his money into that. Trump has already disparaged that, and Elon is being Elon. This is a dumb idea. Okay,
he's like I like that people are impatient with the pace, right, of reform. I'm all for them being impatient. I'm all for them pushing for faster reform. But things happen at the rate they happen, and I don't think that Elon understands that. He wanted the first big beautiful bill to cut all government waste, and that's not the way Washington works. That is an important first step that the Trump administration took with that legislation. There's a lot of stuff in there that's big. It's been on the books, things that we need to do for decades, right, and addressed in one big bill. But it's not everything. It's not the end of the project. And they're already looking at new DOGE rescission legislation and so forth. So, and another, you have another one that they can do without 60 votes. So, that they're trying to get done. So, like you say, he is trying, but these things take a long time. No third party. The thing is set up. The one thing the two parties agree on is that there should be only two parties, right? They will work together to defend that, right? And so I guess he said he's not really interested in a candidate for president the first time around, but just candidates for Congress. That if the effect of this is you get some more conservative hardliner people who who really want to cut spending, that's not necessarily a negative thing, right? The pressure to cut is important, right? It cannot be the dominant feature of the conversation, but it needs to be a constant feature of the conversation, so that whatever we do, it's always with an eye toward reducing the federal footprint, reducing federal spending, right? That's what we're doing too much of. So, but I don't think he's going to get very far. And I think, he has sort of a habit of doing a lot of stuff temporarily. I suspect this will fall into that category.
Yeah. I mean, Elon is a guy of lots of ideas, kind of throw things up against the wall, see what sticks, and then move on and stuff like that. So,
him and Trump are talking. There's a public rift you kind of can't deny. But also, like the last time there was a public rift that was going to tear them apart, they obviously were talking in the background, and I think they're talking now.
Yeah, well, I think that is the case there, and Elon is always going to be Elon. He's just, if he's not happy. And I think you're right about the pace. Elon can be a little bit impatient. And you've got these businessmen, from the corporate world, who are used to being able to say, we need to redesign this. We need to cut the budget here. We've got to hire people. Right. We've got to fire people, whatever. And it happens in fairly short order, but with the federal government, it's a monolith. I mean, it's just ridiculously large.
When he's, here's the thing. It's like when he's at Tesla or SpaceX or wherever, he is the only Elon, right? What he says goes. When you're talking about Congress, that's 535 Elons. They are all the commander, right? None of them is in charge. Therefore, they're all in charge, right? So you're dealing with 535 kings. They won elections. And they have their privilege too, and you can't move them all in the same direction at the same pace.
Right. Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, that's the thing, is that when you're the CEO of a corporation, what you say has the last way. I mean, you're the majority shareholder, you're the CEO, all those kind of things matter because you have the power to make changes with a swift decision.
Right.
But when you're a guy like Elon Musk trying to make changes from the outside, even though you have the blessing of the president of the United States under an operation such as Doge, you're still fighting against those 535 other people, and sometimes even the president himself, depending upon what you're trying to do, and say that it can't be done right away. But I think that steps are going in generally the right direction. I'm going to be very curious to see what happens with my tax situation for the next couple of years, to see if it gets radically altered one way or the other. My taxes went up under the Trump tax cut. Maybe this time it'll actually go down because of I'm now an old coot, and I get a $6,000 deduction or whatever for kind of offset Social Security, which we haven't started collecting yet, but that's kind of how they were dealing with that. And but there are going to be people who are going to be helped. I mean, the first $25,000 in tip income, is exempt. Okay, well, I don't know how many people make $25,000 in tips, but apparently, there are people in high rolling places that can easily make that or more in a year. So that's a good thing for them. And then other people on the lower end of the scale, they don't make that much, but that means that's real money to them, and things like that. So there's a lot of things that have to be worked out still, I think, in terms of how the tax tables come out with all of these things and how it affects, all the parts of your life. But it seems to be, at least on the surface, a step in the right direction. Like everything else with legislation, always too many carve outs and other things going along the way. But if we take steps to reduce government spending, reduce our head count, and things like that, that's good, which will lead me to that SCOTUS decision about the fact that Trump has the authority to fire government employees. Was that 8-1? I think.
Well, so it said he has the right to order them, to tell them to start planning to fire employees.
Yeah,
which is not quite the same thing, right? And so the actual firing, that's what I don't know if you saw it. It was 8-1. Ketanji Brown Jackson was the dissent, and Sotomayor wrote in a concurring opinion for the majority that the notion of whether it's legal to actually fire them is not what's before us here. So we can't consider that because it's not the case that's been made to us. So so that case could still be made, and they're not out of the woods on that, but certainly it's a big step forward that the federal government, the Supreme Court seems to be saying with some consistency, that the executive has power and the judiciary has to respect it.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see how this really plays out. Once again, I think it's just showing that that in general, though, I mean, the Trump administration was moving in the right direction on this. That as they try to, they're trying to reduce that head count. They're trying to make government more efficient. get that smaller government that we all want. They've got the unions fighting against them, so this will continue to be a battle. But goes to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court at least says, okay, as you said, the right to plan to do this. Okay, fine, and go on with that. So, yeah.
So what he's going to do is he's going to fire them, and whatever happens in court, by the time anybody's actually brought back to the work, most of those people will have had to move on, right? You're fired, and there's some vague thing going on in court, and the months keep going by, and you got to pay rent. Those people are going to go somewhere else. So you're not going to be able to put the band back together anyway, which I think is the real aim. Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you remember one of the most, remember when Ronald Reagan fired the air controllers, and everything like that. It's like, a lot of them never came back because they had gone on and found other jobs.
Yeah.
Because anytime you get into a situation like that, this is not something that's going to be resolved in a month or two. This is going to take a while. So, you have expenses and bills to pay. You cannot wait an extended period of time unless you're some extremely wealthy individual and that can hang on for a while. You're probably going to have to find another solution. You may have to move to another state to get another job.
Right.
So that just changes. So those people won't have a job when it comes back to it. They won't even want that job. One last thing before we go to our quick roundup is the IRS issued a ruling now that churches can endorse candidates. So there apparently was what do they call it? The Johnson Act or Amendment or whatever that was in there. It's been in there for decades, and that had basically said that they couldn't do any of this stuff from the pulpit. They couldn't endorse candidates from the pulpit. But the IRS had said that they had really not enforced that over the years, right?
That's right. Souls to the polls. I mean, they were pretty, brazen about it on the other side.
Right. So now it's just kind of wide out in the open and everything like that. I don't know. I guess I have kind of mixed emotions about that. I mean, I'm sure one thing that will happen in my church is that it still won't change the way we operate. We're going to focus in on religion, and teachings of Jesus Christ, that kind of a thing. And, anything dealing with politics, that's outside the purview. You can talk about it with your friends and family or whatever, but it's not going to take place within the confines of a church building on a Sunday.
Well, I mean, everybody says that going in. I hope it works out, right? Because people who are interested politically start trying to meddle with it, So someone better be ready to stand up and defend the church, right? Because you will get attacked on that. So I have mixed feelings about it too. As free speech. Why should a preacher, as opposed to any other community leader, be enjoined from sharing his opinion or her opinion? But on the other hand, that's not what church is for. You're turning church into something else, and you're making it a political battleground. And I think the people that are involved in that are going to find out that they were probably better off without it.
Yeah, I mean, I do say that. I could potentially see a bishop somewhere, or bishops out in Utah, being a very conservative state, maybe throwing some politics into their message. Now they don't get up and address the congregation every Sunday. It's always different people within the congregation, which could now make that even more of a wild card in some place like Utah.
There's already been 20 U.S. Catholic bishops who have written a letter protesting Trump's immigration policy.
Yeah.
So they say they're acting in their own capacity and also all that, but you're printing the letter because it's 20 bishops.
Yeah. Right. So I don't know. I mean, I'll be curious to see what happens here and how much more politicking goes on. Some churches have been just doing this for a long time, so that just basically puts them out in the open, and that's fine. That they can go on and do whatever they want to do.
Yeah, and the option is you got to send cops of some nature into churches all over America and decide whether what you heard was enough to jump up and arrest the preacher during the sermon, which this has its own set of problems. So it probably, sad as it may be, it probably is more practical to say this is no longer a rule than to try to enforce it.
All right, time for our quickie wrap up here. RFK Jr. Food dye ban. I read that he's run into a couple of obstacles, mainly with the makers of Fruit Loops and M&Ms. I haven't eaten Fruit Loops since I was a kid, but M&Ms, and I've sworn off to chocolate candy more or less. But I mean, look, okay, to me, those are kind of iconic things in America. If the makers of, if they're not killing you, but something's always killing somebody anyway. Your food, it's like, are you going to really mess with M&Ms though? I don't know. I think M&Ms.
I was thinking about, like, Richard Pryor said, he went way in the other direction on this. He said, I don't want to be 90 years old, laying up in a hospital bed, dying from nothing. Something. So if it's Fruit Loops or whatever, I don't know.
I don't know. As I recall from people I knew that worked in the White House, I mean, there are M&Ms or were M&Ms on Air Force One. So,
that's right.
RFK, what are you going to do?
Other ones, you don't have the shoe requirement anymore at the airport, right? The TSA kind of quietly removed it. Me and Lori were actually on a plane when that happened, when Richard Reed was caught trying to bomb the plane. We weren't on the same plane. We were on a different plane. So we were flying to Houston to go through there to go to Shreveport for Christmas. It happened 3 days before Christmas. And they made us get off the airplane and go completely out of the Houston airport. And they had it like walled off, so we couldn't do anything but walk that path and go all the way out of the airport and come all the way back in through security with our shoes off. So, I mean, we were literally among the first few dozen people in the world to have to take their shoes off. So, yeah, see, I hear you.
I got a good point.
Right. That's a good point. Is like they spend a lot of time talking about things that are before politics that are not exactly endorsing a candidate,
right?
But you are endorsing a public policy position.
Okay. Yeah.
Let's see what else is on here. It was disgusting. The left trying to blame it on the flood on Trump. I think that, enough said on that. Bibi, I don't think Trump's ever going to get a Nobel Prize.
I'd find that to be virtually impossible.
Yeah, but they keep nominating him. I mean, how many times can one man be nominated and not win? So
he can always have that on his resume. Nobel Prize nominee.
That's right. 3-time Nobel Prize nominee.
I mean that they do that in Hollywood, right, and stuff like that.
3-time Emmy nominee.
Right. Nominated for Oscars, Emmys, all that kind of stuff. So he getting that. I'm sure that Trump would love to get that, but there's a political force on this too that'll prevent that from happening, I think.
Yeah.
At all. So let me throw my 2 cents in here on this. So the Maryland, we have this ridiculously, Democrat legislature and our lousy Democrat governor, and then they push through a bunch of fee increases. So fee increases are just taxes in disguise,
right?
And they took the emissions inspection fee from $14 to $30. Okay, I think they almost doubled or 50%. I don't know what it was. They increased the vehicle registration fee by a huge amount. Another problem. So, and then they added a $5 per tire fee when you buy a new tire. All right. We already have to pay a fee when we dispose of a tire when we get new tires. Right. So, I think we're paying like $2 a tire for the disposal when we buy the new tire. Now we got to pay $5 more to buy the tire. Okay.
They'll have way more taxes than us, and they're going up. Way more.
Where do these guys come up with?
Where does it all go to? Where are your gleaming schools where every child makes an A and scores 1,600 on the SAT? Because that's what you're paying for. I mean, it's like I'll never forget standing on a building in Old Town one night on top of a building. I guess we're watching fireworks or whatever, and it was like if you look toward Virginia, it's lights and wealth as far as you can see. You look across into Maryland, it's dark, right? It's like there's nothing there because you're looking at basically Oxon Hill or that part of the world, right? And there's no growth. There's no one spends money there, and like they talk about, grocery desert, restaurant deserts, all this stuff there because they don't know, people don't want to do business there because of taxes and regulations and stuff like this. So, at some point, probably even Maryland will realize the folly, but we're not there yet. Not even close.
Yeah, but the answer is a government-run grocery store.
Yeah. Cannot wait to see him try to do that.
That solves all the problems, right?
Solves all the problems.
All right, and then lastly, just the Wimbledon has been they instituted robots to do line calls, and they had a little bit of they've had some glitches there along the way.
Some of the calls.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tell you, baseball absolutely needs to get at least get it where you can review balls and strikes, like they do in AAA.
Well, yeah. See, the thing about the bot in Wimbledon was just that, they there was a ball that was clearly out, and all the only thing that the bot said was like stop, right? And so they had to go back and they looked at it and they're like, well, they had to replay the point because the rules of the Wimbledon Tennis Association or whatever they call it, club. So that was kind of where they were at with that they had no procedure in place to say, oh, well, human can overrule the bot at that point in time. But I mean, if you're the one who won the point, you're going to be kind of upset because it was clearly out. And then they have to replay the point. And I think the player lost the point when they replayed the point. So it's like, that's insult to injury. So they have some issues, with that they've got to work out. So I don't know. Maybe there could have been more testing. Apparently, though, even a bigger controversy at Wimbledon is the fact that what do they call it? Strawberries and cream. They increased the price
of the strawberries and cream.
Yeah, of that. Yeah, for the first time in decades or something like that. So that's really got people up in arms.
Probably Trump's fault.
Yeah, probably Trump's fault. Somewhere along the line. All right.
Oh, you know what we never talked about one bit was this Epstein files business. And I guess they're just not going to. I guess they don't have a list. Something. Biden probably threw most of that stuff away. If it implicated Trump, like the left says. You had Biden. Trump was killing Biden in the 2024 primaries, right? Election. And then they put in Harris and Trump was killing Harris. You're telling me they let Trump become president again without putting this out? Why would they do that? Why would they let him win the election without saying, hey, world, at least consider the evidence of what Trump was doing with Jeffrey Epstein? If they had it, why didn't we see it then?
Yeah, I mean, I left that out because I think there's still a lot of unknowns and still a lot of stuff we have yet to learn on that. But maybe that'll become a little clearer, in the ensuing weeks or something like that. Because they are talking about it a little bit now. Once again, there's like, where are these files? All this kind of stuff. So anyway, we're out of time, folks. Thank you for joining us again. Please, as always, stay safe and stay well. Remember, we live in the greatest country in the world. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. And as always, God bless America. We will see you again. Probably next Thursday. I'm traveling next week. Wait a minute. I guess I can do Wednesday. I think I'm flying on Tuesday. See, I'm losing track of time. Anyway, I'll double check on that.
Okay.
I think it's just I'm just going to be in a different part of the country. So for me, I'll be like 2 hours earlier my time, time where I'm going to be doing. But we'll keep it the same 11 o'clock time. See, I got to pay attention to where I'm going. All right, everybody. Thanks a lot. We'll see you again.